Human trafficking is happening right here in mid-Michigan. It's an epidemic in the shadows, leaving tens of thousands of people living as captives right in our own neighborhoods. Tonight, 6 News investigates Michigan's hidden secret. You'll find out the shocking truth behind the epidemic. Plus, you'll see how police and lawmakers are cracking down on the crimes, and we will teach you how to spot the signs of human trafficking. Our special report starts right now. Our state is a hotbed for human trafficking, and it's a problem that only continues to get worse. The United Nations estimates 21 million people suffer every day as human trafficking victims. It's a global problem impacting every community, including ours here in mid-Michigan. One woman has made it her mission for more than a decade to raise awareness about trafficking here at home. Bonnie Bowman has her story.
Human trafficking is loosely defined as sex or labor exploitation, but Jane White has another word for it.
Human trafficking is slavery. In fact, I really prefer the term slavery because we're talking about an ownership of people that are bought and sold.
She's the executive director of the Michigan Human Trafficking Task Force, focused on educating the public, prosecuting the traffickers, and supporting the victims. As awareness of the problem has grown, so has the army of people fighting back.
We started with 20 police officers in a room at MSU. We now have over 135 different agencies.
White says sex trafficking is usually a relationship between trafficker and victim, the promise of a better life by selling sex. Labor trafficking preys on the poor and unemployed, the promise of a job and a paycheck. That promise is what hooks the victims.
What are the available kinds of opportunities that I can't have and that someone promises me that it's possible?
No one knows how many victims there really are. A 2015 congressional report says it's possible almost 18,000 people are trafficked into the country each year. And as many as 100,000 children are trafficked within the country each year. White says it's almost impossible to quantify the problem, especially at a local level.
There's nothing more frustrating than trying to get research and grants, and when people say, how many victims did we have? And our inability to give a number.
What she does know, human trafficking is happening in mid-Michigan.
Human trafficking, slavery is a real issue in your community, in your neighborhoods.
White says we need reliable, evidence-based research and data collection to better quantify the number of victims, how they're being trafficked, and where it's happening. To learn more about labor trafficking in mid-Michigan and how our location plays a part, head to WLNS.com. When our special investigation continues, we're taking an inside look at how technology goes hand in hand with helping and fighting human trafficking. That's next. Stay with us.
6 News Investigates Michigan's Hidden Secret is sponsored by House of Promise, providing survivors of human trafficking a place to heal.
Our special 6 News investigation of Michigan's hidden secret continues tonight with a deeper look at how technology plays a role in human trafficking. Traffickers who once recruited victims in person can now use anything on the internet, from websites and apps to online groups and chat rooms. Our digital trends analyst Melissa Brennan spoke with Michigan State Police and researched different websites used by traffickers and law enforcement.
Buying and selling humans is the second fastest growing crime in the world, right behind drugs. The International Labor Organization estimates that there are over 20 million victims across the globe, and it's not slowing down. And nowadays, the $150 billion industry relies heavily on technology. With tech giants continuing to push for user privacy against the government, it's becoming harder and harder for agencies to screen this type of communication to help victims. While technology is advancing, so is the sophistication of traffickers. They know how to use the internet without leaving footprints behind, using virtual private networks and proxy servers. This is all to mask the source of their communication. I spoke with Michael Teachout, a Michigan State Police sergeant in the Computer Crimes Division, And he says technology with human trafficking is a double-edged sword.
The technology makes things for the human trafficker and the sex trafficker both easier and more difficult. It makes things easier for them in that through technology, the apps, the internet, and utilizing those things, they can reach a wider audience. But it also makes it harder for them because doing all that, it's more public.
And Michigan is one of the highest profile states for human trafficking. The Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, or FOTSA, is a new law that gives state attorney generals, county prosecutors, and sex trafficking survivors an easier path to legal action against websites promoting advertisements for commercial sex encounters. In April, Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette praised this bill and joined President Donald Trump in the Oval Office for the signing.
The credit goes to the survivors, Mr. President, because of leadership in Congress and your signature as Attorney General of Michigan. It'll give me, other attorneys general, and county prosecutors the ability to shut down these bad actors, the Craigslist, the Backpage, and so this is a monumental day. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Bill.
There's a national human trafficking hotline that is available 24/7 online, a local tip line within the Michigan State Police Department, and OK to Say, which is a confidential tip line for the state of Michigan. And like Sergeant Teachout says, do not be afraid to use these services.
If something seems strange and it doesn't seem right, tell somebody. If you see something, say something, let us know. I would rather investigate 1,000 tips that turn out to be nothing and everything's fine than somebody doesn't make a one tip and that's a victim that could have been saved.
As you just heard, the old adage, if you see something, say something, absolutely stands true for the digital world. Still ahead tonight, Sherry Jones teaches us how to spot the signs of human trafficking so that you can see if it's happening in your own neighborhood. Our investigation of Michigan's hidden secret continues right after this.
Welcome back to our special investigation of Michigan's hidden secret. We've looked at what human trafficking is and how technology can help fight it. Now we're exploring how you can help battle the epidemic. It's possible it could be going on in your own neighborhood and maybe in the house next door. But do you know the signs of human trafficking well enough to alert the authorities if you suspect it? Michigan State Police recently created a video showing us what to look for when it comes to spotting human trafficking. Take a look and see if you notice the signs.
On the surface, everything looks like a normal day, people interacting and going about their business. But it's what you might not see right away that's criminal. We're talking about human trafficking.
That could be happening right in front of you, but you've got to be aware.
Workers who are in or near people's homes on a daily basis play a critical role in identifying potential cases of human trafficking.
I think a couple things that stood out for me in the video was the control aspect. You saw many videos where people were physically escorting a young person into a van. You saw them closing the shades and pulling them back away from a window. You saw doors that obviously had been used, but you had a lock on the outside.
So how did you do? Did you notice any signs of human trafficking the first time? Or were you surprised by what you missed?
It really brings to reality how we have to be paying attention and that these signs are all over. And if we just go through our daily walk without really an openness to what is actually going on, I think we're all surprised. And I think that video does an incredible job of really highlighting the things that are out there that we could just blindly miss.
And that's where hardworking men and women help uncover and stop this horrific crime.
These companies that are out there training their staff, that are out there daily interacting with the public, coming onto people's property to do their meter checks or whatever, the awareness of that and to have an open eyes to what's really going on.
And that's exactly what the Lansing Board of Water and Light is doing, training its workers to be aware of what's happening in local neighborhoods.
We are out in the community. We supply more than just utilities for the greater Lansing area. We are the eyes and ears out there, and they have specific training that's done for sex trafficking for our field folks. It's much more obvious after you've had the training. And so you look up and some young girl's looking out a window, and all of a sudden she's moved away from the window or the shade's pulled. That doesn't seem right. People are basically friendly. So that sends the radar up and, call the supervisor, call 911. It's up to the employee's discretion on how serious they think that the situation is at that time.
BWL meter reader Rashawn Molden says the training he received has made a big impact on him.
Sometimes we walk up to houses, you kind of get that feeling, you know what to look for. You don't like to look in people's houses too much, but you like to, protect the community as much as possible.
When you talk about human trafficking, I don't think you have a right not to be involved. I think we owe it to the folks out there that are being forced into this and held against their will to do something for them. The tragedy is they'll go through any depth to lure, to exploit, to profit from these victims, and that's what we're trying to stop.
Police say you should never discredit your sixth sense. So if you feel like something isn't right, if you notice something unusual, you should always make the call and let police investigate.
So many times that is what has led to rescuing young girls and boys that have been forced into this situation.
Consumers Energy is also working on implementing a program to train its workers on how to spot human trafficking. We've seen human trafficking cases go to court right here in mid-Michigan. In February, 41-year-old Amber Speed was sentenced for running a sex trafficking ring that involved underage girls. The case against her started after an investigation by a state trooper who had just attended a training on how to spot human trafficking. She's now spending between 5 and 20 years in prison. And that's not the only case involving human trafficking we've seen recently. Last year, 50-year-old Brad Cornea was found guilty of trafficking a minor. He was sentenced to between 16 and 40 years in prison. Cornea is perhaps better known as the sole suspect in the disappearance and presumed death of his former girlfriend, Krista Luth, back in 2008. One of the biggest human trafficking busts in our area happened in 2014. That's when a human trafficking ring that targeted teenage girls was broken up by police. Prosecutors charged 2 men and 1 woman with running the operation that stretched from Lansing to Detroit. Jonathan Purnell was sentenced to just under 6 years in prison. Christopher Bryant was also convicted for his role, including transporting a person from Michigan to Arizona to force them into sex trafficking. He's spending 4 decades behind bars. Coming up next, state officials are hoping new laws can help victims of human trafficking and help police stop it. We'll show you what's being done right after this.
Our special 6 News investigation of Michigan's hidden secret continues. Human trafficking in Michigan has risen into the light in recent years, and we've seen a huge increase in reported cases. But lawmakers are hoping they can help at the state level. Justin Cree spoke with Michigan officials about what's already been done and what comes next.
We have a problem in the state. I think in 2017, if my memory is correct, we had about 350 actual cases of human trafficking.
350 reasons intervention is important to stopping this growing problem in Michigan. With hundreds of calls to a national traffic hotline, the Great Lakes state has a great big trafficking problem, a problem that is well known for a number of reasons.
Michigan is a little bit unusual. We have the international border. We have, other than potholes, we have a pretty good transportation system. So yeah, I think we have we're bordered, I think 5 different states.
Matt Laurie is one of 9 members that make up the Human Trafficking Advisory Board. A law passed in 2014 formed the group made up of nurses, members of law enforcement, even trafficking survivors. They meet monthly to discuss their main goal, which is educating Michiganders to find vulnerable victims.
A lot of these people involved in human trafficking are not able to reach out themselves for help because of the circumstances they're in. So it's incumbent upon us to train other people in the community to be able to see that and hopefully report it.
State Senator Judy Emmons spearheaded the efforts to push human trafficking legislation through Lansing. The main goal was to change the statute of limitations. Now trafficking victims can go after their perpetrator up to 25 years after being trafficked, up from 6 years before the new law went into effect. Together, almost 24 bills have been signed into law. Victims can now have past criminal convictions expunged from their record if the crime was committed while they were trafficked. Victims can now sue their perpetrator for mental and physical suffering, and all Johns must register on the sex offender registry if they are caught soliciting sex from a minor, something the senator wishes would have gone a step further.
There's still the idea that somebody chooses to do this, and that's still a prevalent thought out there, and that they are an adult. What people don't realize is they start out as children, they're coerced into it as children, they're convinced that this is what they should be doing because their boyfriend convinced them of that, and they age into being an adult who is trafficked as well. We have work to do on that.
The new laws also created the Human Trafficking Commission, a 13-member board, and unlike the Health Advisory Board, the commission is more state workers, including Circuit Court Judge Michelle Rick, and stationed in the Attorney General's office, with the main goal to supply the tools and resources that law enforcement and Michigan communities need to successfully fight human trafficking.
It's up to local entities to take the tools that we provide them and to implement them. But I must say, this commission is very active, and we have undertaken a lot of projects, and we do see the fruits of our labor.
There are more people being trafficked, more people in slavery today than at any other point in human history.
This video is just one tool put out by the commission showing hospitals how to spot and take control if a human trafficking victim walks through their doors. Our state has a real human trafficking problem, but for Senator Emmons, she is not done fighting for the victims and fighting to end human trafficking here in Michigan.
We have to convince our colleagues that this isn't a consensual relationship. This is not, just because the person is an adult doesn't mean they aren't being misused and abused, and they aren't a victim. So more convincing to do, and more, really just educating folks, not only in the legislature, but throughout society.
Our state now has 19 laws on human trafficking, and lawmakers in Lansing aren't the only ones working on solutions. Our elected officials in Washington, D.C. are working to stamp out human trafficking in our state, but they can't seem to get the House and Senate to work together. Our Washington correspondent Jessica Smith has the details from D.C.
On each side of the Capitol sits a bill. One is Republican Congressman Tim Walberg's. The other is co-sponsored by Democratic Senator Gary Peters. Both bills aim to stop human trafficking.
Human trafficking is a big problem in Michigan.
But neither bill is on its way to the president's desk. The House unanimously passed Walberg's bill last summer, but the Senate has not taken it up. It would train Department of Labor personnel to spot signs of trafficking while they're out inspecting work sites.
We ought to make sure that our regulators are trained, they're astute in noticing what's going on and then taking action.
The Senate passed Peters' bill last fall, but it has not moved forward in the House. Peters' bill would give schools grants to make sure school resource officers know what to look for.
To recognize who a victim of trafficking may be.
We asked Walberg and Peters why their bills have not moved further. Both blame scheduling and the long list of things Congress has on its agenda, but they're both hopeful their bills will move forward soon.
We just want to get it done as quickly as possible.
Peters and Walberg insist Congress has made combating trafficking a priority. Walberg points to the Stop Enabling Online Sex Traffickers Act that President Trump signed into law earlier this year.
And it's having impact already. Sites are being closed down.
Peters cites one of the first bills he saw signed into law back in 2015. It would create a pilot program to train healthcare professionals while they're in medical or nursing school.
To recognize not only the overt signs of trafficking, which would be physical abuse, but also the more subtle signs.
Peters hopes the pilot program will eventually establish a curriculum schools across the country can use. But the program has not started yet because it does not have funding. Peters says he's looking at every option available to find the money and put a spotlight on what he says is one of the fastest growing crimes in the country.
People don't think it happens in their town. They don't think it happens in their county.
As he continues to push the Senate to take up his bill, we asked Walberg if Congress is doing enough.
Well, I think we're doing plenty right now. Is it enough? Time will tell.
Here for you in Washington, Jessica Smith, 6 News.
Up next, we continue our special report on Michigan's hidden secret and hit the road with state police for a first-hand look at the state of sex trafficking here in the capital city. Stay with us.
Our special 6 News investigation of Michigan's hidden secret continues tonight with an in-depth look into the sex trafficking that's happening right here in Lansing. I recently rode along with a Michigan State Police trooper who's found himself at the forefront of these investigations as more and more cases are reported locally. We're out on the streets of Lansing with Michigan State Police Trooper Sam North.
This is one of the areas that I'll drive through here and there and see if we can come up with anything.
As he patrols Lansing's neighborhoods looking for any signs of sex trafficking and prostitution.
Lansing's a big enough city where it is prevalent and it's happening every day.
Both on and off the road, these days Trooper North spends more and more time investigating local cases of sex trafficking.
I think people would be surprised about how much sex trafficking there is in Lansing.
It's not a crime he set out to become an expert in, but one that rose to the forefront when he discovered his first case during a traffic stop at the corner of Pennsylvania and Hazel, less than a mile from Potter Park Zoo.
I actually stopped it just right up here by this white truck over there.
During that stop, Trooper North says some things just didn't add up, like the age and relationship of the three people inside.
The girl in the front seat also gave me an out-of-state ID card, which can be a red flag in these cases as well, because a lot of times with prostitution, people travel. It ended up being a case that was charged locally here for human trafficking.
That case led to another, and that one to another, and Trooper North soon found himself submerged in local investigations.
There are a lot of places that are known as houses of prostitution in the Lansing area. This could be an area for that. There's a lot of drug use in this area. There's a lot of criminal activity.
Sex trafficking is hidden under the dark veil of prostitution. It's a crime that looks a lot different here in Lansing these days. In the past, women could be seen walking the streets day and night, approaching prospective clients who drove by. But Trooper North says that, for the most part, has changed.
Nowadays, with the internet, it's so easy for an ad to be posted for prostitution and have a date scheduled between the customer and between the John and the girl, where they can just drive directly from their house to the John's house or to a hotel, and there's really not that much advertising that you see on the streets.
And that's not the only difference. Prostitution was for many years considered a victimless crime, but now Trooper North says the old thought that women are prostituting themselves for their own personal gain couldn't be further from the truth.
What's usually happening is there is some sort of manipulation, there's some sort of benefit to somebody else.
And many of the women are victims of someone they trust.
The victims might have a dating relationship, or at least think that they're in a dating relationship, or that their boyfriend loves them, or this guy loves them, and yeah, you know, he's got these other girlfriends too, but I'm the most important one, and they're only here to help out, you know, occasionally for a little bit so that we can pay for rent. Anything could be justified in their heads because what they're feeling is emotional and it's not necessarily logical.
While the majority of cases Trooper North has seen involve adults, children are very often the victims of this growing crime.
I've had cases where it's been a daughter of a suspect where the mom's been the trafficker.
And while sex trafficking is happening everywhere, he says it's more concentrated in the cities.
The more people there are, low income, struggling families, people with drug addiction, all those things kind of are risk factors for prostitution, and when you have a lot of that in a small area, you're going to get a lot more prostitution.
They're going to take you.
Sex trafficking is a scary thing, but it's not like you see in the movies. You aren't likely to be randomly grabbed, kidnapped, drugged, and sold for sex.
I don't want people to be scared that if they go to the store, they're going to be sex trafficked. I mean, that's not going to happen. I think it's safe to say that you can go grocery shopping in Lansing.
But Trooper North warns that these days, our children are all vulnerable of being lured away by someone who wants to sell them for sex, no matter where you come from or where you live.
My best recommendation for people to avoid that would be to not let your kids use social media, but especially young kids, but if they are using social media, you better be watching what they're doing because anything can happen.
While new legislation and many new programs aim to help survivors, Trooper North says despite growing efforts to stop it, sex trafficking will never really go away as long as there are people out there who are willing to pay for sex. Well, up next, we continue our investigation into Michigan's hidden secret by examining how truckers are fighting human trafficking in our state. You don't want to miss it.
6 News Investigates Michigan's Hidden Secret has been sponsored by House of Promise, providing survivors of human trafficking a place to heal.
Our special 6 News investigation of Michigan's hidden secret continues tonight with a look at how truckers are making a difference in the battle against human trafficking. Sex trafficking happens daily at many truck stops, rest areas, and highway motels. It's called Truckers Against Trafficking, and their mission is to educate, equip, empower, and mobilize members of the trucking and busing industries to combat human trafficking. To put it simply, they teach truckers what to look for and who to call for help, and now eyes looking to rescue victims are multiplying by the minute. It takes a special kind of mind to move freight mile after mile.
And I've always loved driving. Yeah, probably always will.
Wow. Richard Harris has been hauling goods for nearly 20 years. He says a lot has changed in the trucking industry since he first started, both serious and silly.
And two, our horn's not as loud anymore, so like, that's not as loud on back in the day. You hit that horn, it was like, Mom!
But he's changed too, because truckers like Harris are now aware of a major problem deeply rooted in the trucking industry. Human trafficking is frequently found at truck stops.
It is a problem, and it's a problem here in Michigan.
And it's a crime Captain Michael Crum with the Michigan State Police has been working to stop for years. He says these locations are used by a transient customer base and is often hidden from view, providing enough enticement to bring in the pimps.
Now, unfortunately, truck stops and areas where there's large populations of males are an attractant to these people that would do this to these victims.
This one was back in a truck lot, and it didn't look typical.
But the secrets, signs, and symbols of human trafficking are hidden no more. In fact, more than 560,000 people are now TAT trained.
It's exciting because we are truly raising up this almost invisible army of everyday heroes.
Laura Cyrus is the operations manager for Truckers Against Trafficking, an awareness program educating drivers about the horror along the highways.
It's really about changing the hearts and minds of an industry really that has been seeing this crime happening for a long time, but giving them the tools to understand what they're looking for.
Cyrus says there are far more truckers than law enforcement on Michigan roadways, routinely stopping at places prone to women being pimped out. So by connecting truckers with the right information, it could save a victim's life.
And the idea behind this is that these men and women, they're already well trained, they're observant, they're vigilant, and they can absolutely provide an extra set of eyes and ears for law enforcement in recovering victims and having traffickers arrested.
Getting TAT trained involves understanding the problem, what signs to look for, and phone numbers to call to report something suspicious. This simple method to stop human trafficking has mobilized many, some with great influence in order to stop these crimes.
Making deliveries to people's homes.
This is Kristen Beck. She's the North American Road Logistics Modal Leader with Dow Chemical, meaning she manages tens of thousands of workers connected to the trucking industry and was moved after getting TAT trained.
When we learned about the program and we perused their training platform, we decided to make it a mandatory requirement for all of our service providers in North America.
So that means truckers not just in Michigan, but across every state in the continental U.S. attached to Dow is aware and watching. That may only get bigger.
Eventually, we'd like to take this global because it is a growing global crime, and we are a global company.
It's not just truckers either. While working on ways to remove human trafficking from Michigan, Captain Crum was also impacted by watching a TAT training video a few years back in Iowa and sprang into action.
We contacted every truck stop in the state. We contracted every rest area. We partnered with MDOT and the Secretary of State to make sure that these awareness videos and information gets out and disseminated.
The movement is working too. So far, 1,980 calls have been made to the national hotline by truckers. 557 cases have been generated, with 1,035 victims getting saved and identified. Stats that didn't exist before Truckers Against Trafficking. And now that Harris knows what's at stake, he's happy to keep his eyes both on the road and for those who may need his help.
If I had a family member that was, got, abducted or something like that, I would want people to be looking out for them, I would hope people, if they seen something, they would call and say something,
Truckers aren't the only ones joining in on the fight against human trafficking. Uber says it's doing more to help drivers spot it. The ride-hailing app is teaming up with several groups to make it easier for its drivers to report suspicious situations. Drivers will now get updated information on how to spot human trafficking and how to alert authorities through their app. Big events can be a big draw for human trafficking as tourists and visitors flock to cities. The North American International Auto Show in Detroit is one of those events. This year, federal agents worked together to arrest more than 20 people for human trafficking during the auto show. In January, Detroit City Council created a commission on human trafficking. They heard from a woman who runs a shelter for sex trafficking victims about how bad the issue is there.
I run a shelter for human trafficking survivors, and I have folks in my shelter who were taken at 7 years old, transported across the country in a multitude of states, and who can verify and who have had experiences in having sex in various parts of the city. We've got to put an end to this. It has to stop.
And again, if you're being trafficked or know someone that might be and you need help, call the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. That number, 888-3737-888. We also have a list of resources in the Scene on 6 section of WLNS.com. Still ahead tonight, we'll tell you about a newly opened home in Lansing. It's serving as a safe haven for young women and girls who have escaped from human trafficking. The goal is to help them go from victim to survivor by offering a number of resources as they transition back to normal life. Up next, you'll learn more about how this house is working to make a difference and how you can get involved if you want to help. Stay with us.
We continue our special report on human trafficking in our state by checking in on the House of Promise. It's a home that recently opened its doors to help get victims of human trafficking back on their feet. The goal is to give them a second chance at a better life. Alexandra Illich talked with the organization's founder and is here for you now with the impact it's already making here in the capital city.
Back in 2007, I heard a story of 5-year-old children being sold into sex slavery, and then by the time they were 18, they were considered used up and no good. And something broke in me. I knew when I walked out of that meeting that night that I wanted to be part of the solution, that no young girl should ever be told they're no good. So the journey began.
It took 12 years. Lots of hard work and fundraising.
We've got young girls that are being rescued and they have no place to go.
And the everyday challenges that come with kickstarting a business.
I'm trying to get the House of Promise as a household name.
But now, Sherry Montgomery is fulfilling what she believes is her purpose in life.
We bought the house, closed on it December 28th, and we got our first girl March 24th, and now we have 4 of them here, and it's just amazing.
This is the House of Promise. It's a safe haven for young women and girls aged 12 to 22 who were victims of human trafficking. The foundation of this organization is built on faith and hope, serving as a place where victims turn into survivors through education, guidance, support, and unconditional love.
It's picking up the pieces from whenever that first trauma hit is where the brain stopped growing. And so you've got an adult with maybe a 10-year-old mentality that she's trying to work things through.
You see, victims of human trafficking experience both physical and psychological abuse.
They took me from my home when I was 6 years old.
And for some, it starts at a young age. According to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, traffickers will use physical violence to dominate and control their victims. They'll do this by starving, beating, or raping them. Once rescued, victims may experience signs of depression, anxiety, and PTSD. But once they come into this home, Montgomery vows to help them cope while keeping this important promise.
The promise is that they will be loved, accepted, that we will help them find themselves, we'll help them grow. We promise that we're going to be a family. So is there drama in this house? Oh yeah, anybody that has teenage girls can probably understand what the drama is in this house all the time.
Up to 12 women or girls can live here at a time. They'll call this place home, rent-free for 2 years, a time period in which they'll learn life skills such as how to budget, read, and in some cases, handle their emotions. They'll also undergo therapy to help them rebuild before hopefully leading a successful life of their own.
That's really one of our biggest things, is when there's something they don't like or something that happened, it's walking them through those emotions.
The program isn't for everyone. It's designed to help those who have been severely sexually abused and trafficked.
We do a lot of the intake for a month, and we figure out what their treatment plan is. And that's when there may be some girls that don't have to stay here as long. And then there's some girls that may have to stay here longer.
And after 5 months of being open, the House of Promise is already working hard at fulfilling its mission with no signs of stopping anytime soon.
We are getting a girl about every 2 weeks is what the average is. And if that keeps going, we got to grow, and we got to grow fast.
And Montgomery already has plans for when that day comes.
My dream is to have another house. I would like to, my dream is to be able to house 100 girls. I want to be a national home. But my dream too is to buy property to get apartments so the girls can, after they come out of program, that they can rent, apartments from us where we can keep a close eye on them. So when something really, some kind of trauma happens to them, we are still really close to them to help pick up the pieces.
Thank you for that, Allie. And it is so great that we now have a place locally where these victims can go to really start rebuilding their lives and hopefully move on from this.
Yeah, one thing that I learned through this whole special, and it actually came from, well, I've learned a lot from this whole special, but one thing that for whatever reason is sticking in my mind, and it actually came from the founder of the House of Promise, was that it's not unusual, especially in Michigan, for moms to traffic their own daughters for sex. And I just...
It's breathtaking, especially when you are a parent, as we all are, to think of everything that you would do for your child, and you want to put them in a bubble and protect them from everything, to be the person actually putting them out there to be hurt over and over and over again. It's just, you can't even comprehend it.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you just how anyone can maybe fall into this kind of trap in a sense, because no parent, any parent, would think, I'm going to be doing this on purpose, but yet they find themselves in a situation where all of a sudden they're involved with it. And that's what I learned, really, is that anyone can fall victim to this, especially when I speak to people who have spoken to traffickers and those who have been trafficked. It just happens. And I think with my story with Truckers Against Trafficking, they're pointing out signs for people to say, whoa, that didn't look right.
And I love that.
The numbers to call. And again, another thing I'm learning is there is a huge amount of information and phone numbers and people helping to get this solved.
Yeah, and something that I like to address too is there really is a fear out there that you could just at any moment be grabbed and put into the sex trafficking life. And that's really not what we're seeing happen. Not to say that it's only happening in the cities or the urban areas, but I learned that a lot of the victims know the person who ends up trafficking them. And they're manipulated into it.
Well, and your piece was eye-opening. I mean, you hear us say, it's happening here, it's happening here, it's happening here, but to actually drive along and go through Lansing and say, oh, it happened here, and it happened here, and it's just, that really stuck with me, too.
And the thing that Trooper North told me, too, about our children just being vulnerable, no matter where you live, it's not a downtown Lansing thing. It's happening in the upscale neighborhoods as well, because these teenagers are so vulnerable, and they're looking for somebody to say, you're beautiful and I love you and come be with me. And so many times, because of social media, they are literally walking out their front doors thinking they're walking to something, and they're walking to anything but. And it is very, very terrifying as a parent.
And thinking about Sherry Jones's piece about how every one of us here and everyone watching, we now know what to look for as far as some of the signs out there of human trafficking.
That's one thing that's cool about this is we're learning as well. We're educating ourselves. I've learned a whole great deal, and I catch myself now looking for those signs. It's impossible, especially when you have 2 children and you get involved. And so now all of a sudden I'm becoming an expert on what to see, and that little booklet that I had, I still have it in my pocket. So it's something good to have, and it can happen anywhere. You don't just need to be a trucker like in my circumstance or a police officer. You can just be a person and help.
We all need to be aware because this is a problem that is not going away. It seems to only be getting bigger. So we learned a lot. We hope you learned a lot. And we thank you for joining us tonight for this special report.
If you're being trafficked or know someone who might be and you need help, call the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. That number is 888-3737-888. We also have a list of resources in the Scene on 6 section of WLNS.com. This has been a 6 News special presentation of Michigan's Hidden Secret.